On this episode of 2036, the podcast.
You walk into Emory's library and you see exhibits on the very first floor. You see people not being quiet. They're studying and, working out major problems for their math and chemistry classes, like right there in front of you. You go up to the second or third floor and you'll run into the Emory Center for Digital Scholarship, where they're trying to figure out how to work this drone so it can take pictures of, Georgia's landscape. And as you keep making your way up the floors, you'll run into something new and something interesting. They are not places for you to go and just get information. They're also places for you to explore and create. And I've found that one of the most creative places in the world for me was the library, which is why I currently work there. And in very similar fashion, the museum, the Carlos Museum. I've loved this position that I'm in now, where I get to work with the Carlos as well as Emory libraries, because the people there are just as creative and just as interested in how we can do something new and innovative.
Welcome to 2036, the podcast season 3. I'm Ken Carter, Charles Howard Candler Professor of Psychology at Oxford College and Director of Emory Center for Public Scholarship and Engagement. And today I'm here with Dr. Clint Fluker, who is the Senior Director of Culture, Community, and Partner Engagement for Emory University Libraries and the Michael C. Carlos Museum. He previously served as the Rose Library Curator of African American Collections. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So your role has been described as one that will enhance community-facing collaborations while connecting Emory's library and the museum to Atlanta's arts and activist community. Why are collaborations and partnerships with local schools, arts communities, and other entities important to Emory and to the libraries?
It's very important because we are part of the community. It's not Emory engaging with the community. It's Emory being part of the community that we are already a part of. We oftentimes, when we are in these spaces of higher learning, when we are at academic institutions, we sometimes inadvertently will create these barriers where it seems very difficult to engage with people who are not actually on the campus with you. But frankly, all of us, when we're here, the staff, the faculty, the students, we come from somewhere else, and our entire lives are not here on the campus. And that's really what we're trying to tap into, is the sense that when you come to work, you can begin to bring more of your full self to work. You're part of communities throughout the city. You're part of communities outside of the city. And why not create those relationships or firm up those relationships so that we're learning from each other? So that's one reason why it's important. It's also important so that we keep things fresh, so that we are aware that the things that we're talking about within the institution aren't the only conversations that are happening.
So February is Black History Month, and the Rose Library has quite a collection of African American memorabilia and records. What are some of your favorite items in the collection?
Oh, man. I have a lot of favorite items in the collection. One thing that is connected to the reboot of The Wiz. So The Wiz was this play that came out in the 80s, and it was directed, and the costumes were designed by this amazing person named Jeffrey Holder, who was a dancer. He was a playwright. He was an actor. I mean, you can name all the different things that he was. But we have his papers as part of the Jeffrey Holder and Carmen de Lavalade collection here at the Stuart Rose Library. And it's a huge collection. Why I'm mentioning that is because we have partners here, Brandon Grimmett, who is a co-producer of this particular reboot of the play, of the musical. Wow. This is an incredible thing. And we have papers that are related to this. Right. And so what I want people to know about Emory and about our libraries is that we have connections to all kinds of things that are happening. Mm-hmm. And that students, when they hear about The Wiz, they might know about the movie. Yeah. But what about the play that led to the movie? That's the really interesting aspect about this. Within the Jeffrey Holder and Carmen de Lavalade papers, my favorite thing is actually these storyboards from a play that I don't believe actually made it to the stage. It's called The Odyssey of Anna and the Red Pumps. One of the things that I was taught by archivists within the collection was within the Rose Library was that Jeffrey Holder often drew out what he wanted to put on stage, but because he was this incredible painter, his storyboards were like works of art in and of themselves. So we have like these hundreds of images that are in full color of this play, and every time I look at them, I'm just like, I wanted to see an exhibit of just this. So that's right now, it's one of my favorite pieces within the collection.
Now, the Rose Library also has a pretty big collection of Black comic book collection as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, if I have to.
I get this is one of your favorite things.
I mean, it's definitely one of my favorite things. I have many favorite things within the Rose Library collection. But yes, so we had comic books before, but years ago, I think around 2016, we started a Black comic book collection. And so these are comic books either through major distributors or independently published that are by Black authors. And we have hundreds of different comic books, but there's a few that just really, just stand out to me. One collection is from John Jennings. John Jennings is a professor at UC Riverside, and he is really important to the field of Afrofuturism today. A lot of the aesthetic conversations, a lot of the imagery that you're familiar with, and also the reboot of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower as a graphic novel and Kindred as a graphic novel. He was the illustrator for those graphic novels. We have papers of his here that showcase his sketches as he's working on different graphic novels that he independently published. We have some of his books. We have a little bit of his, kind of work ethic, the papers that speak to this, the storyboards, the notes that he was trying to work out. I just love that. But the reason why we started this collection was because at the time, now it's very popular. After Black Panther came out, everybody's like, oh, I love Afrofuturism. How do we get more Black comic books? Before that, people weren't really collecting Black comic books like that, or institutions weren't. And so we wanted to showcase this history, but also find a way to connect to people who would not usually come to an archive. An archive is often stereotypically seen as just this place for old things that professors should, go to so they can study and write their books. But in the end, it is a place for everyone. And it goes back to our conversation earlier about community engagement, about creating community where community should be, and maintaining that community. And so how do you open the door so that people of all ages and all backgrounds could feel welcome within a space and find a genuine connection? And so this was one of those collections that we felt was important to start.
And so do you feel like there's more of a recognition for the contributions of Black Americans in terms of science fiction and fantasy?
Oh, there's definitely more of certainly it is appreciated more now than it was, say, even 5-10 years ago. I did my PhD work here at Emory, and when I started, within the first year or two, decided that I wanted to do work specifically on Afrofuturism and Black science fiction and fantasy because I just not seen a lot of it. And then when I started studying, I realized that there also wasn't a lot written about it. There were a handful of people who were diligently trying to get that message out. But it just was not a huge field. But I think, 10 years, 15 years removed, now that we're in this space, I mean, there's an Afrofuturism exhibit at the Smithsonian. There was one in New York recently. There are several here at Emory. This is a known thing now. And because of it, it allows for other interesting conversations about the work in science fiction of people from other places. But I recently learned that this artist named E12, he is a comic book artist as well as a muralist, and he is a major influence on Afrofuturism in the Dominican Republic.
Wow.
Did not know. But I wouldn't know that if we didn't have this kind of space within the Academy now to discuss people talking about futures that are from diverse backgrounds.
And what is it like being at a place like Emory that sort of encourages those collaborations?
it's extremely exciting. I mean, because I could always meet new people and engage in interesting projects and feel that I have the resources as well as the kind of support of the academic apparatus to try something out. That's not always the case. And so when you have that kind of support, it enables you to learn more and to hopefully educate more at the same time.
Now, you're also a visual artist. I want to hear a little bit about your work.
Oh man, you're really getting into it. So yes, yeah, I'm a visual artist, and I often joke with people I am an artist who, got a degree and got an administrative job. But in the end, I love visual art, and I've tried my best to surround myself around it, and I practice it at the same time. I do a very unique kind of thing. I do large-scale origami installations.
Oh, wow.
And I paint on them and draw on them. And I often tell stories on these installations. So we were talking about science fiction earlier. I tell little vignettes that are from my imagination on these origami structures. And every once in a while, I'll show that work, and it's usually after I'm done doing something here at Emory and I have a little bit more time to work on it. Very recently, I was in this exhibit at Arts Clayton. The curator there and director, Brian Hebert. And the reason I was in the exhibit is because I was working on all this material throughout COVID. And my son would come downstairs and he'd look at it and he'd be like, so you're curating like all these other artists all the time, but like, where's your art? Like, are you going to show your stuff? And I was like, you know what? You're right. Let me make a call.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
so he was inspiring me to get back out there. But I just find that art is one of these mediums that allow for people to gather and have conversations about life, often difficult conversations, often fun and exciting conversations that they wouldn't necessarily be able to have if the art didn't bring them together. And so I'm always trying to immerse myself and to practice that every day.
So you're an artist. Your academic training includes a philosophy degree from Morehouse College. You have a master's and doctoral degree in American Studies. Talk a little bit about your progression from through this and how the things that you've done help you in your role today.
I planned it all so perfectly. Each piece, just one after the other. I am a wanderer, and I always have been. I have a lot of different interests. So I have academic interests. I have artistic interests. Sometimes they meet. My wife and I, we run an organization called Third Space, where we do art salons. We gather around art, like I was talking about earlier, and we usually interview somebody who's doing something interesting or innovative within that space. I like to organize, so. For me, it's been a journey of questioning things. And I started with philosophy, and this might be useful to students if they're listening. I started with philosophy because I found that philosophy is a discipline of wonder. You're trying to find and explore ideas. And for someone who likes to, move through and up and down and sideways with your thoughts, it's a great place to do that. Through asking those questions, I found different ways of answering them or going about answering them. And for me, it was through art and culture. And so I did my philosophy degree. I started traveling and just saw a lot of different things around the world. I thought, I graduated in 2008 from undergrad. So like every black man myself, I thought I was about to be president, like Barack Obama. I was like, let me do my best impression.
Right.
So I was doing a lot of civic-minded, policy-minded work. I did a Fulbright in South Korea, and I enjoyed that process. But when I came back home and I had to make a decision about how I'd want to spend my time for real, I decided to do a PhD, and I got a master's PhD here at Emory. And it really was the result of an undergraduate experience I had at Emory before. I had done a Mellon Mays Fellowship with Rudolph Bird, famous professor here, and Cynthia Spence at Spelman. And they encouraged me to really look into science fiction and fantasy because I just thought I'd always found it interesting because to me, all science fiction and fantasy was just imaginary worlds where people are doing philosophy. So I was like, let me play with these ideas here. And then when I came back from traveling, I was like, where should I go to school? I was like, well, this is where I had a great experience and I felt nurtured in that way. And so I started my PhD work here, landed on really trying to look specifically at what was this movement of Afrofuturism and related movements, and trying to describe it and articulate its history and its trajectory. But I had another experience while I was doing that, where I worked at the archives. I worked at the archives the entire time as an assistant curator to Randall Burkett and Pelham McDaniels, and all the books that I was reading. I say this a lot because it's true. All the books I was reading in school, I just found that either evidence of the books that I was reading in school was in the archives, or those people themselves would show up. So I'd be looking around, and then suddenly there's Carrie Mae Weems, or suddenly there's Theaster Gates, and I was just like, this is nuts. How are these people here now when I was just reading about them, a week ago? And so it became a space that really appealed to me because curating in an archives and a museum space is a lot like, it's a place that is welcoming to someone who has a lot of interests like I do. So I could curate exhibits, or I could work on a documentary, or I could do some of my own artwork, or I could write a book, or I could, it's like I could do a podcast. So that is how I ended up in this space. It was not planned. It was not something I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I just kept following my interests and had a lot of great mentorship along the way, so that it was not fleeting. It was something that I could count on as a profession at some point.
Now, the libraries of the past were really different than the libraries we have now. I remember when I was a kid, if I ever told my mom I was bored, she would drive me downtown, drop me off at the public library, give me a quarter. I would have to call her when I was not bored anymore. So I would hang out at the library all day in the summer, surrounded by mostly books and records and maybe like microfilm machines.
That's right. That's right.
And so now libraries are very different than they were previously. Thinking about that trajectory, like what do you feel like the library of the future can help connect people with knowledge and other kinds of things?
Oh man, you're bringing me back to those days of my parents. Both of my parents were academics and still are, and so they just hang out at libraries and museums, and they would drag me there, and I used to be like, oh my God, and then of course the irony.
Yeah,
Here we
which
are.
I'm sure they appreciate and love.
Man, they bring it up every time they see me. But yeah, the libraries of the future. I think that libraries, they evolve. With people, like they're where we're going. They are not, static places. This is kind of the way I describe the archive too. There's a certain thing that's happening there, but it doesn't mean that it's literally never going to shift. Mm-hmm. When you walk into the library, as of right now, it's already different than what you remember. Like you were saying, it's like you walk into Emory's library and you see exhibits on the very first floor. You see people not being quiet; they're studying and working out major problems for their math and chemistry classes, like right there in front of you. You go up to the second or third floor, and you'll run into the Emory Center for Digital Scholarship, where they're trying to figure out how to work this drone so it can take pictures of Georgia's landscape. And as you keep making your way up the floors, you'll run into something new and something interesting. And that, to me, is what we can continue to expect. that they are not places for you to go and just get information or just study. They're also places for you to explore and create. And I've found that one of the most creative places in the world for me was the library, which is why I currently work there. And in very similar fashion, the museum, the Carlos Museum. I've loved this position that I'm in now where I get to work with the Carlos as well as Emory libraries because the people there are just as creative and just as interested in how we can do something new and innovative. One other thing that I say is that the libraries and the people that work there are experts on information, but they are also engines of creating this scholarship that is very important. So they know so much, the people that work in these spaces, and their ability to collaborate with a variety of different type of people is often undervalued. So what I hope to see in the future is the kind of the recentering of libraries and museums as kind of the foundation of a university. Because there's just so much that can be created there to aid us in the future.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of the opposite. I feel like libraries are sort of this engine of information, but we're also in a time of seeing a rise of book bans, both in public libraries and school libraries as well. So what can university libraries and librarians do to help with this sort of tide of censorship that we've been seeing lately?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've definitely all seen the news and, experienced that challenge in some way, shape, or form, regardless of where we work in these spaces. I think that our role in the libraries here is to speak the truth, to let people know that these books, that these ideas do exist. It's very hard to, combat something that you think is bad or to promote something that you think is good if you don't have the full story. And so it's hard to have an argument. It's hard to have a conversation if you're really only working with part of the information. Right. And so I think that our role is to continue to make those stories, those ideas as accessible as possible so that people know what they're talking about. I mean, in the end, I understand the challenges that we face with this, but I also know that a path forward, a good path forward is always one that is inclusive and allows for the variety of ideas and conversations to be in the public eye. And at a place like Emory, where we have that capacity, where we can do that, where we have these experts who can lead us through these conversations, so we're not just out here by ourselves trying to figure it out. We're so lucky. There's such a benefit to this, and we should not let ourselves just put our head in the sand. We want to make sure that we see, that we know what's happening around us. So that's my best answer to that.
Well, I want to thank you so much for all you're doing for Emory and for the community. And thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
To learn more about 2036, Emory's campaign to transform the future, visit 2036.emory.edu.